I'm divorcing you and marrying your sister." Those decisive words came out of Kevin's mouth, and I felt a rush of anger heat up to my ears. I had thought for a while that my relationship with Kevin was beyond repair. But I couldn't understand why he would choose my sister over me. Yet, I was filled with the feeling that I no longer wanted to be a family with Kevin. "All right then. In exchange, I'll be asking for division of assets. I'll give you as much as you want if it means I can divorce you." Kevin seemed to care more about marrying my sister than about the money. I threw the divorce papers I had prepared at Kevin. "Sign this and submit it. And no backing out at the last minute, okay?" "Who's backing out?" With a triumphant look, Kevin began to fill out the divorce papers. I never want to deal with him again. I truly hated Kevin. My name is Megan. I'm 48 years old and work at a multinational consulting firm. I don't know any other women my age who are actively working in consulting like I am. I've always liked working. The more I work, the more I earn, and that feels good. I've been entrusted with more responsible tasks over the years, and I had no complaints about my job. However, at home, I'm currently facing a bit of a problem. Well, it's probably more than just a bit of a problem. In fact, I am currently being cheated on by my husband, Kevin. How do I know Kevin is cheating? Because our 16-year-old son Kyle saw it. Kevin is 50 years old, 2 years older than me, and works at a construction company. We met through an arranged marriage and have been married for 21 years. We might not have had a passionate love, but I thought we were quietly nurturing our love. However, according to Kyle, the time I thought we were somewhat happily spending together was all a lie. I will now talk about what happened after Kyle discovered Kevin's affair. Kyle is 16 and in high school. He's more mature than other kids his age and often takes the initiative at home. When I come home late from work, he even cooks simple meals. I'm proud to say he's a capable son. Kevin always comes home about the same time as me, or later. Especially during busy periods, he often works late, and both Kyle and I might be asleep by the time he gets home. We were just an ordinary family until recently. It all started with a comment made one evening at the end of the year, as I was cooking dinner after coming home from work. "Hey, did Dad say he had something to do today?" It was unusual for Kyle to ask about Kevin. Maybe he had something he wanted to ask his father. "Today? I think he said there was a year-end party at work." I told Kyle what Kevin had said that morning. Then Kyle made a face that seemed unconvinced. "Huh, a year-end party, huh? Is a year-end party something you do with just one woman?" "What? What does that mean? A woman?" Kyle opened his mouth again, as if to clear up my confusion. "Actually, today, on my way home from school, I stopped by Henry's house." "Oh, Henry was absent from school today and I had some stuff to deliver to him. Henry's house is quite far, about an hour from school. And it's near Dad's workplace. After I left Henry's house, I saw Dad walking hand in hand with a woman on a deserted street. And that woman, it was Aunt Natalie." "What do you mean?" I was stunned. Kevin had met up with my sister Natalie after work. Natalie is 13 years younger than me, 35 years old. She's supposed to be working part-time at a restaurant, not near Kevin's workplace. So, the fact that she went all the way to near Kevin's workplace meant she must have gone there to meet him. I've always thought something was suspicious. I wonder if he really loves Mom. If he's cheating with Natalie, a lot of things make sense. Kyle's sharp insight made him suspect that Kevin was having an affair with Natalie. Now that he mentioned it, it made sense. Kevin had never whispered sweet nothings to me since we got married. Now that we've been married for 20 years, I guess it's inevitable, but our relationship has always been somewhat cold. I hadn't compared it to other families, so I hadn't thought much about it. "So you were thinking about that? I had no idea." "Mom, you're a bit slow on the uptake. But if Dad ever betrays you, I'll support you all the way." Kyle's kind words made me feel choked up. Ever since Kyle told me about Kevin's affair, I've been on edge. That day, Kevin came home drunk around the time the date changed. It was long past the time Kyle had gone to bed. I mustered my courage and asked Kevin, his face flushed and drunk. "Hey, was it really a year-end party today?" "Huh? What are you talking about? I told you this morning it was a year-end party." Kevin, realizing I was onto something, answered with a grim expression. "Actually, today Kyle saw you and Natalie walking hand in hand." "What?" As soon as Natalie's name came up, Kevin's face instantly tensed up. That reaction was a clear giveaway. I pressed on. "Natalie's part-time job is quite far from your office, isn't it? So it's not like you just bumped into her after work. And holding hands? That would be odd if it were just a chance meeting, wouldn't it?" Confronted, Kevin was momentarily speechless, then let out an alcohol-laden sigh and said, "So you think I'm cheating? Do you believe such baseless accusations? Maybe it was a mistake? Kyle is at a sensitive age. He must have misunderstood. If you've got time to think about such nonsense, let's just go to sleep." Kevin was determined to play dumb. I sighed and went into the bedroom, giving up. Kevin was definitely having an affair with Natalie. At that moment, I felt almost certain of it. The next night, I got a call on my phone from Natalie. Kevin was still at work, and Kyle was studying in his room. It couldn't be a coincidence that Natalie contacted me the day after. Natalie isn't the kind of person who normally keeps in touch with me. She's a decade younger and was pampered by our parents. In terms of personality, she's the complete opposite of me, who is responsible and neurotic. She doesn't look like me either. I take after our mother, and Natalie takes after our father. There was a time when I envied Natalie for being more beautiful. We used to play together a lot when Natalie was little, but I moved out when I was in middle school, and we didn't spend much time together after that. So it was unusual for Natalie to be calling me after such a long time. I took a deep breath and answered the phone. "Hello? Hey, Megan, long time no see." Natalie's carefree voice sounded really distant, making me feel nostalgic. "Why the sudden call? It's rare for you to call me." I immediately asked about the one thing that had been on my mind. "Yeah, well, I think you've probably figured it out by now. I thought it's time to tell you something." Her tone was teasing, and it made my heart flutter nervously. "What are you talking about?" I pretended to know nothing, prompting Natalie to continue. "Huh? I thought you'd realized, Kevin told me yesterday." Kevin. Just hearing that name made my head heat up. "What are you trying to say?" I was fed up with Natalie's evasive tone and asked her directly. Okay, don't be so hasty. Actually, Kevin and I have been dating." My sister cheerfully announced that she was dating my husband, and I despised her deeply for it. "You're too clueless, sis. We've been together for 18 years now. And to think, you only found out through Kyle's story. How slow can you be?" 18 years? The number Natalie spun out left me speechless. Could it have been that long? 18 years is before Kyle was born. "You didn't know, did you?" Kevin always laughed and said, "She won't notice because she's clueless. She's too busy with work and doesn't care about me." Indeed, you didn't notice until today, which is a pity. Kevin has always said I was cuter than you. Natalie's mocking voice echoed from the phone. Natalie had always been proud of being prettier than me. Was that why she thought she could get away with messing with someone's husband? I was stunned by the unbelievable reality and couldn't find the words to respond. "It's sad to say this, but you've been cheated on right after getting married." Natalie's grating laugh darkened my heart. Being cheated on by my own sister and having her openly admit to the affair, even taunting me over the phone, is practically a blow to my pride. "I think Kevin will talk to you soon. I just confessed because I'm tired of hiding it. I also hate the idea of being sniffed out by a detective." After saying just that, Natalie unilaterally ended the call. What does she mean by this? If it were just an affair with my sister's husband, it would be one thing, but for her to call and rub it in like this makes me question Natalie's sanity. However, this was just the beginning. From the day after Natalie's call, the way I looked at Kevin had completely cooled off. Perhaps Natalie had told Kevin that she had confessed their affair to me. In any case, I absolutely hated the idea of talking about Kevin and Natalie. Since I no longer loved Kevin, I just wished he would leave for work in the morning and come home as late as possible. I had explained to Kyle that Kevin was cheating on me with Natalie. So that's the situation, and your father and I might end up separating. Whose side will you be on then? I tried to respect Kyle's opinion as much as possible since he has the right to choose. Of course, I'll be with you, Mom. I don't want to be with a traitor like him. Kyle promptly dismissed Kevin. Relieved by his response, I was still unsure when to bring up the divorce. It was after Natalie's call, confessing the affair, that she started to harass me with many messages. Until now, Natalie had barely cared about me, but now she seemed brazen, sending messages. Tomorrow, I have a date with Kevin at the aquarium. It's been years since you went, hasn't it? I'll buy you a souvenir. I was shocked by the message. Why would she go out of her way to tell me about her date with Kevin? Natalie's behavior, which was out of the ordinary, made me feel nauseated. The thought of a 50-year-old man being smitten with my sister at an aquarium made me feel even worse. Please don't tell me these things. I replied in anger. Huh? Are you jealous? Jealous women are not a pretty sight, you know. Natalie's unnecessary response prompted me to quickly close my phone. What is going on? For someone to cheat with a person's husband and then send details about their dates is beyond insane. The thought that this might continue was sigh-inducing. As I expected, Natalie's senseless harassment didn't stop there. Most of it was about their dates, but some messages went as far as saying, "We went to a hotel yesterday." Disgusted, I decided to block Natalie's contact. Relieved that I would no longer receive messages, I then started getting calls. Even during the day, while I was busy at work, Natalie would call, and I ignored her. But no matter how often I ignored it, the calls from Natalie didn't stop. Thinking it would be a nuisance to my colleagues if it continued ringing, I decided to step out of the office. Hello, what do you want? Oh, finally you answered. It's terrible to just ignore someone. While I was bustling at work, Natalie, who only works part-time whenever she likes, spoke in a carefree tone. I asked her, somewhat angrily, to quickly tell me what she wanted. Actually, I'm pregnant with Kevin's child. What? The cheerful and excited voice from the other end made me wonder if I had heard wrong. What, you don't believe it? If so, I'll send you the ultrasound picture. Natalie ended up sending an ultrasound picture. Indeed, the picture clearly showed she was pregnant. Is this real? As I asked with a trembling voice, of course. If you can't believe it, ask Kevin. I felt nauseous and choked on the spot. What, are you okay? Was it a shock? Natalie's insensitive remarks continued. I felt like I was going mad and told Natalie. It's not just a shock, it's disgusting. Why would you go out of your way to tell me something like that? I do it because it's fun to see your reaction. The crazy response from Natalie made my head spin. Natalie has always been considered more attractive than me and has the sweet mannerisms typical of a younger sister, which has continuously been praised by others. However, she probably envies me for being serious, good at school, and successful in my career. Natalie was terrible at studies and had a history of bad behavior in school, often causing our mother to be called. It dawned on me that my sister has always harbored a sort of hostility towards me, and now she's hurling it all at me at this moment. Anyway, don't contact me about this stuff anymore. I hung up the phone before Natalie could reply. Then I blocked her number to somehow manage the situation. After hanging up, I realized how ragged my breathing had become. The fact that Natalie was pregnant with Kevin's child was more shocking than I had thought. With this revelation, my decision to no longer be with Kevin was cemented. For a week, I could not find any peace at home. Kyle, seeing how distressed I was, took over the household chores. Having such a caring son was the only solace for my heart. Kevin hardly showed his face around me. We were effectively separated within the house. One Saturday afternoon, when I reached my limit, Kevin happened to be at home, and I decided to confront him directly. I need to talk to you. I was surprised by how cold my own voice sounded. Kevin, who had been lounging on the sofa looking at his phone, arched his back and asked, "What?" Seeing the determination in me, he finally got up from the sofa and said, "I'm divorcing you to marry your sister." The definitive words leaped from Kevin's mouth, and I felt a surge of anger rush up to my ears. I had long thought that our marriage was broken. But I could never understand why he would choose my sister over me. Yet, I was filled with the resolve not to be a family with Kevin any longer. "Fine. But I'll be asking for a substantial amount in the division of property. I'd give you anything to be able to divorce you." Kevin seemed to care more about marrying my sister than the divorce itself. I threw the divorce papers I had prepared at Kevin. "Write this up and submit it. And don't change your mind at the last minute, okay?" "Who's changing their mind?" He began filling out the divorce papers with a sense of triumph. I never want anything to do with him again. I truly despised Kevin. Kevin scribbled on the divorce papers and carelessly handed them back to me. "Just submit it yourself, I can't be bothered." Kevin spoke dismissively as I took the papers, irritated. "Kyle will stay with me, that's okay with you, right?" "Yeah, do whatever you want. I'm not interested in that kid." Kevin had never been very involved in parenting, and Kyle didn't really acknowledge Kevin as his father. So, it was no surprise when Kevin expressed no interest in Kyle's custody. "Well then, I'm going to marry Natalie. Get that divorce filed soon." With those final words, Kevin left the house, likely heading straight to Natalie's place. I could imagine that Natalie's house was already equipped with Kevin's clothes and essentials to the extent that he could live there without taking anything from ours, which made me even angrier. "Mom, are you okay?" I thought Kyle was studying in his room, but he came out to the living room and comforted me. "Yes, I'm fine. But, your father and I are going to get a divorce." I hesitantly informed Kyle of the divorce. Even for a high schooler, the news of his parents' divorce must be unsettling. I was determined to ensure that Kyle's life remained as stable as possible. "Okay, I understand." Kyle responded firmly. I was surprised that he wasn't more shaken by the news of our divorce. "After all, I was the one who told you about Dad's cheating. I'll protect you, Mom." His reassuring words brought tears to my eyes. Even if we end up as a single-parent family, I'll make sure Kyle doesn't lack anything until he's grown. With that in mind, I promptly took the divorce papers to the lawyer's office. The following Sunday, while discussing a day out with Kyle to clear our minds, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, but thinking it might be important, I answered. "Hello, Megan? Can you stop blocking me? Because of you, I had to use another phone." Natalie's familiar voice made me catch my breath. I hadn't expected her to go to the lengths of using another phone to call me. "What do you want?" Now that I was divorced from Kevin, there should be no reason for her to talk to me. I wanted to end the conversation quickly and asked in a cold tone. "Don't rush me, thanks for divorcing Kevin." "Oh, it's not official yet?" "Well, either way, as soon as the divorce is finalized, I plan to marry him right away. Also, I'm having my wedding, so you should definitely come. If you don't come, I might do something bad to Kyle." "I'll send you the details later," she said casually and then hung up. "A wedding? What do you mean?" I couldn't keep up with Natalie's thought process. Who invites the ex-wife of their soon-to-be husband to their wedding? Irritated, I immediately called my mother. She was unaware that I had divorced Kevin and that Natalie was planning to remarry him. I had my doubts about discussing matters of infidelity and divorce with my mother at her age. After hearing my story, my mother expressed anger towards both Kevin and Natalie. "How can she cheat with her sister's husband and then remarry him?" she exclaimed indignantly. I also told her about Natalie's plan to invite me to the wedding. My mother couldn't understand Natalie's outrageous actions. "So, Mom, I need your help with something." I shared a plan with her to put Natalie in her place. My mother agreed immediately, which was a relief. "Watch out, Natalie. You'll regret making me angry." Months passed, and the day of Natalie and Kevin's wedding arrived. The invitations were indeed sent, and it was clear the ceremony would be a small affair with just family. I planned to leave Kyle at home, but he insisted on going, so I took him. "Thanks for coming to witness my happiness," Natalie sneered in her wedding dress. "Why is Megan here? And Kyle too?" Kevin was visibly flustered. It seemed that inviting me was entirely Natalie's idea. "Why did you invite them?" "I wanted to see the look on my sister's face," Natalie replied unabashedly. Kevin grimaced, puzzled. As I expected them to start arguing, a staff member intervened, and the wedding began. The ceremony was supposed to start with the father, but he was absent. "Is Natalie's father not present?" A staff member frantically searched for him. Of course, he wasn't there. He had said, "I don't want to attend the wedding of a daughter who cheated," and indeed, he hadn't come. Similarly, Kevin's family also did not attend for the same reason. Thus, only my family was present. Since her father was not there, Natalie had to walk alone. Her face was tense, and it was undoubtedly the worst memory of what was supposed to be her wedding. Throughout the ceremony, as Natalie and Kevin exchanged vows, kissed, and left, none of us guests clapped. Natalie exited with a tearful face. Yes, this was the plan I had devised. I had my mother explain to the relatives to make sure Natalie could not have the happy wedding she wanted. It might seem like spiteful harassment, but in reality, Natalie was the one who stole my happiness by taking my husband. I believe this was just retribution. "Now, we will move on to the party," a staff member said, trying to smooth things over as they ushered us to the venue. No one approached the bridal table, and nobody offered to take photos. Feeling her envisioned wedding crumble, Natalie broke down crying before reading a letter to her parents. "What's going on? Why is everyone ignoring me? Today was supposed to be a happy wedding day." Her crying voice echoed through the microphone. The staff were visibly flustered, unsure how to handle the situation. Kevin looked pale, at a loss for words, standing there stunned. Thinking I shouldn't cause more trouble at the venue, I stood up and walked over to Natalie. "I'm sorry, but I instructed everyone today to ignore whatever Natalie does at the wedding. I thought you could handle this much since you've been stealing my happiness for 18 years. I said it with heavy irony, and Natalie flinched. "How could you? Do you enjoy making people unhappy? I can't believe this. Give me my wedding back." Natalie screamed at me, always so self-centered. Kevin watched in shock, apparently unaware of Natalie's nasty character. Despite their 18-year affair, who's really making them unhappy here? Then, from behind, Kyle's voice came, and everyone turned to look at him. Kyle stood up and walked beside me, glaring at Kevin and Natalie in turn. "Who stole my dad and made my mom sad? It was you, wasn't it? You both. How can you play the victim now?" Kyle's reasonable words made Natalie stammer, but the whole venue buzzed with murmurs. "Think about it. What you've done is despicable and awful. You make people miserable. And Dad too. I've never thought of you as a good father because you've always been cheating." When Kyle made his valid argument, Kevin was at a loss for words, uttering only a stifled sound. For a while, neither could find their next words, but Natalie wasn't the type to just give up after being confronted. She wiped her tears and defiantly stared at me and Kyle with red eyes. "You two are insane. It's even crazier that you never noticed the affair. You're really stupid, sis. I always thought I couldn't beat you in studies, but you didn't even notice something like this. Aren't you two oblivious?" Natalie screamed while laughing, as if her emotional brakes had failed. I hadn't expected such a reaction, so Kyle and I exchanged glances. With a serious look, Kyle nodded at me, signaling his readiness. "If you're going to say that, should we reveal that thing?" "What thing?" Natalie snorted dismissively. It seems the princess is unaware of her predicament. It might be better for me to explain clearly. "Who's the father of the child you're carrying?" "What? What do you mean?" Both Natalie and Kevin were shocked and taken aback. "Oh, you didn't know? Natalie, you had another lover besides him." "What do you mean?" Kevin's eyes widened in disbelief. I clenched my fist tightly. It means exactly what it sounds like. Kyle told me. He saw Natalie entering a hotel with another man. If you look at the date on the ultrasound Natalie showed, it fits perfectly with that man's timing. Oh, sorry, maybe we're better off not knowing? Yes. I had heard from Kyle about seeing Natalie entering a hotel with another man. That's why I suspected that even if Natalie and Kevin got married, it wouldn't last. Now, both Kevin and Natalie, the exposed cheaters, were gaping. That's just an accusation. You just wanted to strike back because I looked happy, but that's ugly of you. How can you say I cheated without any proof? Natalie fought back defiantly, but Kyle and I just shook our heads. There is proof, look. I showed Natalie a photo of her entering a hotel arm-in-arm with a blonde man. Actually, Kyle had taken the photo to catch Natalie cheating. Truly, a capable son. What is this? That's not it. Natalie weakly denied it. But with the evidence presented, Kevin had to accept that Natalie had been unfaithful. You were about to marry me, yet you were fooling around with some lowlife. But I couldn't help it. He was too forceful. What? The situation escalated, and it was no longer possible to continue the party. I thought it would be too much trouble for the venue staff, so I shouted with all my might. Both of you are ridiculous. Initially, Kevin, you are at fault for cheating with your wife's sister. And Natalie, if it was just an affair, it might have been one thing, but why harass me by contacting me like this? I don't want to see either of you ever again. Even our mother says she's cutting ties with you. Be prepared. I declared this and left the venue with Kyle and our relatives. I never want to think of those two as family again. I vowed to live a happy life with Kyle, away from those two. Since then, both Kevin and Natalie have been disowned by their families and lost their places to return. Both were mature adults but had been financially supporting each other, so they didn't have the savings. Now they seem to be struggling to repay their debts. Later, a DNA test was conducted to definitively determine if the child Natalie was carrying was Kevin's. It turned out that Natalie's child was not Kevin's. Once this became clear, Kevin, feeling betrayed, decided to leave Natalie. Left by Kevin, Natalie started living with the father of her child, the lowlife man, but he didn't seem inclined to stick around and support Natalie and the child, abandoning them quickly. Thus, both Kevin and Natalie ended up alone, and Natalie became a single mother by default. The child is innocent, but it's only right that Natalie faces these hardships. Natalie still begs her mother for money and help with childcare, but her mother refuses to have anything to do with her. Having given up hope, Natalie decided to put her child in daycare and work full-time. If only she had been this busy from the beginning, she wouldn't have had time to have an affair with Kevin, I thought, as if it were someone else's business. Kevin, for his part, reported his divorce from Natalie to his company and faced such disdain from colleagues and subordinates that he couldn't bear it and resigned. How he will manage to repay his debts from now on, I do not know. I have no sympathy for Kevin, as I want him to experience the same hell as Natalie. Since being freed from the chaos of Kevin and Natalie's affair, it feels as though a weight has been lifted off my shoulders, and I'm able to dedicate myself to work every day with a clear mind. All this is thanks to Kyle, who has always been there to support me. It won't be long until Kyle is an adult. I take pride in him being my son and am committed to raising him to be a respectable adult. I moved into this house and gave birth to the heir, so you better be thankful. It's downright greedy to ask for more. Despite living together and being a homemaker, she acts like a pampered guest. My son's wife, Emily, didn't change even after they had a child. Amidst all this, my husband had a serious accident and passed away, but there's something off about my elder son's wife's behavior. She'll soon realize the consequences of doing things she can't face up to under the watchful eyes of the heavens. My name is Catherine, just an ordinary homemaker. I've been married for about 50 years and just recently said goodbye to my husband. Lately, I can hardly eat. Sometimes, I still feel like he's gonna open that door and walk into the room, laughing. I loved my husband deeply, and we had just promised to live long and spend our lives together. But sadly, that promise was broken way too soon. And they ended up parting ways for reasons that, no matter how you looked at it, just couldn't be understood. Sometimes, I wonder if there was something I could have done. Although I'm head over heels for my husband now, I used to be a career woman. Back in my youth, I loved working and felt that, as a woman, I could live independently if I had a job. But either out of concern or impatience, people around me suggested I go on dates. On the arranged date, you casually have coffee and chat. I didn't want to decide my life based on such a vague series of events, so I turned down every single one of them. One day, my parents probably felt uneasy about my constant refusals. They tempted me with a lipstick shade no one in town had. Thinking it was just one meeting over coffee, I reluctantly agreed. Little did I know, that lipstick-lured date would turn my life upside down. The man I met was pleasant and jovial. He had a childlike face, just grown up. Chatty and sometimes saying more than needed, but he was endearing in his clumsiness. As we spoke, I got drawn in and, before I knew it, we were married. We had a son and a daughter. My daughter was quite charming, and it seemed she had close friends since she was little. She got married and left home at a pretty early age. On the other hand, my son, Kyle, though a man, was the exact opposite of my husband. My son, who has been working at the town hall since graduating from high school, appears rather plain at first glance, with his most notable trait being his earnestness. We, as his parents, saw his good points, but society didn't seem to. Often people would say someone is too nice and thus boring. He was the very embodiment of that. Neither in his work nor personal life did he have any zest. He didn't seem to have many friends, male or female. Despite reaching a certain age, he wasn't well-versed in romantic relationships and seemed uninterested. Yet, the marriage of one of his few friends from high school seemed to spark some desire in him. He often says he's not pretty or interesting enough for marriage, but it seems he harbors a hope of someday sharing his life with someone he truly loves and giving us peace of mind. He has even attended town-sponsored matchmaking events and local mixers. At first, I thought maybe it'd be good for him to experience matchmaking, just as I met my husband, but seeing that my son is paving his own path, we decided to just watch over him without interfering. One day, as spring was in the air, I noticed my son was acting a bit different than usual. "Well, this is unusual for you, Kyle. What's up?" "Maybe it's the spring? I just feel so upbeat." I noticed him paying more attention to his clothing and even browsing through women's fashion catalogs. At first, he tried to brush it off, but being his mother, I knew something was up. I inquired, and it turned out he's seeing someone with intentions of marriage. He mentioned her birthday was coming up and that he wanted to propose to her on that day. My son looked overjoyed. "She's such a vibrant person, full of hobbies. Her smile always sparkles. She has so many qualities I lack and I just want to be with her." Apparently, they met when he was dining at a restaurant near his workplace. For years, my son had made it a routine to eat out at a restaurant every Wednesday and Thursday. During his lunch break, he'd always head to his usual spot and order his favorite meal. One day, a woman who happened to be nearby struck up a conversation with him, and to his surprise, they hit it off better than he'd ever imagined. "I never realized the little everyday things could be this fun. If I just shuttled between work and home, I wouldn't have noticed." "Oh, Kyle, I'm so happy you found someone who makes you feel this way. Will you introduce her to us?" "Of course. Is this Sunday okay? We were planning to go to a cafe, but I'll ask her. She's been wanting to meet you too. I'm sure she'll be okay with it." Seeing our once work-focused and relationship-free son so smitten made me curious about this woman. However, the promised day to meet her did not materialize. "Mom, I'm sorry. She messaged me the other day saying she might have a meeting and might be late. But I haven't heard from her since." If she said she might be late, it means you weren't sure how things would turn out. There's no need for you, Kyle, to apologize for that. Besides, you can introduce her to us another time. Though I tried to assure my son, I had a sinking feeling. Since she's dating with the intention of marriage, she'd be seeing my husband and me as her future in-laws. For her to break a promise without communication seemed unusual. We eventually met her only after they married, basically, after they were already husband and wife. This is Emily, the woman I've been talking about, and now my wife. Nice to meet you. Pleasure's mine. My son married a woman named Emily. With a natural face devoid of makeup, wearing a sweatshirt and jeans, she spoke in a soft, muffled voice. I'd heard from my son that she was a vibrant woman with various hobbies, so the contrast to my expectations was striking. Even as she chatted with me and my son, she was intently peering into a planner she held, jotting something down. A quick glance revealed a schedule filled densely with colorful inks. Fan meetups, events, get-togethers, all terms I'd never heard before. What could they mean? She used to live with her family while working at a local supermarket but decided to be a homemaker after getting married. Given that decision, I wondered why her schedule seemed to be bursting at the seams every day. To me, it was a bit hard to comprehend. There I was, talking with my son, and stealing glances at my watch, anxiously whispering, "I've got a live stream starting in 30 minutes. I gotta hurry." "Oh, Emily, got some plans later?" "No, it's nothing." Maybe she wanted us to guess that she needed to wrap up early, but she replied sulkily. Clearly, she was irritated. With the sour mood killing the conversation, we called it a day. My son, who never seemed particularly interested in relationships, has finally tied the knot and looks genuinely happy. However, I couldn't help but notice his wife's restless demeanor, the way she spoke, her attire, something felt off. Upon hearing of their marriage, we were almost immediately approached with the idea of living together. My son and his wife wanted to save as much money as possible for their future. When they approached us for any possible assistance, they eventually asked if they could move in with us. We were okay with it, but I was concerned if Emily, being in an unfamiliar home and transitioning to a full-time homemaker role, might feel overwhelmed. However, they assured us that there'd be no issues, and the decision was quickly made. Once the decision to live together was made, their actions were swift. Just 3 days after the decision, Emily had already moved out of her previous residence and completed the move. That slight unease I felt when I first met my son's wife grew over time, and its origin soon became apparent. It didn't seem like my son's wife's truly settled into married life. She always had her planner filled to the brim, pictures of male pop stars, and was constantly on her phone. It's my son's wife's right to have such belongings, but constantly being on her phone even when conversing with me, my husband, or my son is concerning. One day, we decided to set ground rules to ensure everyone in the household felt comfortable. The first to speak up was her. Although both our couples live in the same house, we should respect that we're two separate families and refrain from interfering in each other's private matters. Right, privacy. Let's be mindful of each other's boundaries and maintain a healthy distance. However, she hides behind this rule, claiming to be a homemaker, yet hardly does anything around the house. She's always glued to her phone, while I handle cooking and cleaning. She has my husband do the heavy lifting and cleaning the bathroom. But, you see, I have a delicate back and even little things can hurt it easily. But making a man over 70 do the heavy lifting and not even helping, Emily? That's a bit much. I wish you'd chip in sometimes. So you're saying it's okay for me to hurt my back? That's how you think? That's cruel. Didn't we promise not to nag each other about household chores? Have you forgotten? She shouts in a tone you wouldn't expect from her usual muffled voice. When you think you've no clue what she's upset about, she suddenly starts yelling. This is how it always goes, preventing any real communication, and time just keeps passing. Eventually, my son's wife began to shut herself in the shed outside. I saw the light of the TV and heard her shouting someone's name. Probably some male pop star from the photos she always carries around. The shed seems like it's become Emily's personal room. There was no consideration or effort to live harmoniously with those in the house. She only seemed to think about how to live comfortably for herself, which is rather vexing for us. However, my son didn't seem to be able to stand up to his wife, always remaining non-committal. Emily is struggling too in this unfamiliar environment. I'll help with the housework after work. But she just locks herself in the shed during the day. I hear her shouting sometimes, and it worries me. I'll talk to her. It's gonna be okay. We were not sure what happened, but my son's wife got pregnant. There were complications like severe morning sickness and preterm labor threats during her pregnancy, mostly spent in the hospital. But I remember feeling relieved once she safely gave birth. Until now, even though she called herself a homemaker without doing anything, life was okay because my son, my husband, and I pitched in. But now there's a child to care for, and she needs to act like a mother. There might be many adults in this house, but there's no substitute for a mother. Just because she came into this family doesn't mean she can act like a guest forever, expecting everything handed to her on a silver platter. She should realize that those days are over. However, my feelings don't seem to reach her, and life continues as usual after childbirth. In fact, it feels even worse. She leaves my grandchild with my son or us and seems to go out. Around the time the grandchild turned 1, she disappeared overnight and only returned in the morning, which prompted a scolding from me. Going out all night without a word, especially with a child at home? What are you thinking? Be responsible. Huh? You're telling me what to do. I married into this family and even gave you an heir. I get that you're grateful, but you're a bit too demanding. While she's bold enough to say things like that, she also relies on us in some ways. I can't go on trips because it's too rural here. I want to use my taxi fare for merch, so can you drive me? It's quite a self-centered request, but there's no point in arguing about it now, so I just did as she asked. As my son's wife freely does as she pleases, I can't quite figure out what my son saw in her to marry her in the first place. During the time I felt stressed and distrusted by my son's wife, an unexpected incident occurred. One day, I asked my husband to watch over the house because I had a neighborhood meeting. My son's wife seemed to be in the guest house as usual, so I just called out to her from outside and left. When I came back from the meeting, I found my husband collapsed at the bottom of the stairs. He appeared to be in pain and unable to move at the bottom of the stairs. As I panicked from the sudden event, my son's wife emerged from the next room. Hey! Hang in there! Oh no, how could this happen while I'm here? I've already called 911, so just hang on. My son's wife seemed startled, but she was more proactive than I was. Hey, the ambulance is here. I'll go with you, Catherine, please wait here at home. She acted so differently from my son's wife, who would either lock herself in the room or speak harshly to us. I thought my husband would recover and be discharged from the hospital soon, but contrary to my thoughts, his hospital stay got extended. The thing is, my husband wasn't used to hospital life, and it was evident that he was becoming both mentally and physically weaker because of it. When I visited him, my husband looked much frilier than I'd ever seen him before. Beside him sat my son's wife and my grandchild, already visiting. I was worried about him. Seeing him get weaker every day is unbearable. While I was concerned about seeing my husband looking as if he'd seen something terrifying, there was something unsettling about her actions throughout all of this. The usually reclusive she had come out from the next room at that crucial moment. It's as if she knew what was happening with my husband. Furthermore, she seemed surprisingly efficient in arranging for the ambulance and the hospital procedures. My husband seemed like he wanted to go home, yet also showed signs of reluctance. Soon after, he became unable to eat and passed away all too quickly. Between my husband's injury and his sudden passing, I had a lot on my plate. Yet, the shock was too much for me, and my body wouldn't cooperate as usual. Catherine, please don't get too down. My husband and I will handle the funeral. Yes, I'm not feeling well, so can I leave it to you? Ever since my husband got injured, she had been surprisingly supportive. It's hard to believe she's the same person who used to keep such a distance from the family. She promptly made decisions and plans with the funeral director. I've spent a lot of time at home, unlike my husband who worked outside, so I've always been taken care of by my father-in-law. Please let me return the favor now. While saying this, her eyes filled with tears. However, next to her, my grandchild, Henry, seemed restless and suddenly ran off somewhere. He dashed away so fast that it looked like he was fleeing from something, and I lost sight of him. On the day of the funeral, my son and his wife attended with their child, Henry. My husband had always lived with my grandchild since he was born, and adored him like the apple of his eye. Consequently, my grandchild loved my husband very much. Being 5 years old, he probably understood what the funeral meant and that he wouldn't see his beloved grandfather anymore. He seemed different, more restless than usual. However, Emily probably thought that scolding him as usual would draw too much attention in the crowd. Emily noticed his behavior and gently hugged him from behind. "Come on, Henry, say your final goodbye to Grandpa."
"It's not the last. Don't touch me. I'm scared, stay away."
Henry, who's usually calm and rarely makes a fuss, started to act out in an unprecedented manner. The folks around felt that this wasn't just some ordinary tantrum, and began to murmur amongst themselves. Then, with a voice loud enough to drown out the commotion, Henry shouted,
"Grandpa says Mom pushed him."
The 5-year-old, my grandchild, clearly stated what he'd heard. The surrounding crowd was taken aback, and speculations began to fly. Seeing this, my son's wife held my grandchild close, bowed her head for a moment, then looked up and clearly stated, "Lately, he's been influenced by cartoons and says things like this. I apologize for my poor parenting. I'll talk to him properly later." When my son's wife said that, the commotion seemed to die down as if those around were convinced by her explanation. But then, Henry suddenly ran out of the funeral home. A few people, concerned, tried to chase after him but lost sight and soon returned. Despite the disruptions, the funeral had to continue. The rituals and prayers proceeded, and all that remained was to seal the casket. Before the casket was to be sealed, attendees began to place flowers inside the casket and say their final goodbyes. Just then, Henry came running with a pair of scissors in his hand. Henry stopped the person who was about to nail the casket shut, trying to retrieve a fanny pack that the deceased had been wearing inside the casket.
"Dad, get Grandpa's fanny pack he always wore!"
Henry screamed, frantically trying to cut the belt of the fanny pack with the scissors. However, interrupting those words, my son's wife spoke gently to him. "You see, this fanny pack was something Grandpa always wore and cherished. He probably wants to take it with him to heaven."
"Mama's lying. Don't come near. He never said that. Dad, help me quickly."
My son, sensing that his usually calm son must have a reason for behaving this way, rushed over to the coffin alongside him and helped remove the fanny pack. While my son's wife had only stood by watching the two, as soon as the fanny pack was removed, she reached for the fanny pack.
"Stop! Don't touch it!"
My son's wife, seemingly having anticipated this, tried to snatch the fanny pack, but her actions seemed very unnatural. Perhaps my son had his suspicions based on her previous behavior, as he quickly brushed his wife's hand away and handed the fanny pack to his son, Henry. "Henry, what's in this fanny pack? Why do you insist on this?"
"Grandpa told me to help and to check it."
Beside Henry, who was now emptying the contents of the fanny pack, my son's wife yelled at him.
"Stop it! You're probably making Grandpa sad. Do you want to ruin the funeral? Grandpa told me to do this. Stop it!"
Ignoring her protests, Henry proceeded to methodically check every compartment. The last pocket he reached for was a hidden one deep inside. I wasn't even aware such a pocket existed, but inside it was a slightly oversized pen. Holding that pen, my grandchild ran over to a person by the side of the funeral room who had a computer set up.
"Open the cap of this and put it in that machine."
I was clueless about this device. I'd never known my husband to own such a pen, so it was impossible that my grandchild knew about it. Furthermore, my son and his wife rarely used computers at home, so Henry probably didn't know how to use one either. Yet, with his assertive actions and unwavering statements, I couldn't help but believe in some mysterious force at play. What appeared to be a pen was actually a voice recorder. The recording clearly captured the sound of an argument between my husband and my son's wife.
You old geezer, just kick the bucket already. Leave some money behind and get lost. Once you're gone, he'll be the head of the house. You're just in the way."
The voice was unmistakably my son's wife's, hurling hurtful words with unimaginable venom. There was also the distinct sound of something or someone falling.
"Emily, what kind of person are you? Why would you do this?" "It wasn't me, and I've told you I don't know. I was there when he got hurt, he was hospitalized, and even during the funeral. You saw all of it, didn't you? And you still say it's me? It's so sad that Henry has to see his mom being blamed like this."
She continued to play the part of the dutiful wife who had lovingly cared for her father-in-law. Her theatrical tone was irksome. As I was pondering how to address the situation, suddenly Henry spoke up.
"I know what you did. You spread oil on the stairs while I was at daycare, and you talked about getting rid of the old man. Stop making up crazy stories. If you don't cut it out, you're gonna get in big trouble, you hear?"
At first, my son's wife feigned innocence using her son as an alibi. But one statement from her child changed everything.
"Grandpa told me to run because I'm next. Mom, stay away from me."
Saying that, he picked up a paper and pen nearby and began to write something down. Henry was just 5 years old. He rarely wrote anything, but he smoothly continued writing. When I peeked at the paper, both I and my son and his wife were shocked. In handwriting identical to my husband's, it read, "If anything happens to Henry, I'll haunt you. Be prepared."
"Stop it, please stop. I had no other choice."
Feeling cornered and rejected even by her child, my son's wife eventually confessed everything.
"Why would you do something like this? What did you want so badly that you'd harm someone?" "I wanted to support Sean. He meant everything to me."
I was momentarily taken aback by the name, but then I remembered hearing it often on TV. He was a popular singer who was always on the talk shows. From her story, it became clear that this all started because she wanted to spend more money on her favorite idol.
"If it's for Sean, I'll do anything. I realized I have a limit on how much money I can earn. So I thought, why not marry someone rich?" "So you approached me and said you wanted to marry, not because you loved me, but for this Sean guy?" "Of course. Who would fall head over heels for a plain and boring guy like you?"
She initially married my son because she was after his money. Seeing he had a stable job and probably had a lot of disposable income, she set her sights on him and pursued him aggressively. And my son's wife wasn't satisfied with just my son's earnings. She wanted more, a substantial amount of money. She thought that the quickest way to get it was through life insurance.
"I want to be recognized, but just relying on your earnings isn't enough. To get closer to Sean, I need more money." "So you wanted not only my earnings but also life insurance money, all for this Sean?" "To meet him, I need money. Every handshake, every photo opportunity, they all cost money. He has so many fans, and I can't lose, you understand?"
She needed my son for the regular household expenses, and it seemed she believed that my husband would have a larger life insurance payout. If something happened to my husband and the life insurance money came through, it would be split between some. However, most of it would stay in the house. That meant my son's wife could spend it as she pleased. I probably won't be around for long, and eventually her husband, my son, will take care of the household. That means she'll have free reign over the household finances. I remember her saying that she was planning to spend as much money as she wanted on her favorite pop star. After that incident, my son came to his senses and immediately took steps to divorce her.
"I loved you when we got married, especially when you were doing what you loved and shining. But I was blind to everything else. I can't believe you'd even think about harming someone, especially for money. We can't live together, especially not for our son's sake." "Hold on. I know I'm obsessed with my idol, but you love that about me, right? We got married because you loved me. How can you just divorce me like that?"
It's astounding that even after all this, my son's wife still firmly believed that my son loved her. She must have some nerves.
"I believe what Henry is saying and what he sees about my dad. It's terrifying just to think that after my father, you might see our son as a threat. This isn't just a passing whim. I've left everything to you until now, but I'm gonna turn things around and properly raise Henry from now on. Obviously, I'll live with Henry.
I can't believe how oblivious she is, still insisting she'll have rights to live with Henry. She's really lost it.
If you divorce me, where will I live? Well, as long as I have Henry, I'll get child support from you. So, I guess I can let you divorce me. But you might struggle to make ends meet.
So you're basically just seeing our child as a cash cow. It's heartbreaking to think of him growing up with you.
I can't hand over our child to someone who'd harm others for their own selfish reasons.
Soon after, the police contacted us, saying they would investigate, including our home. Apparently, a distant relative attending the funeral was a cop and had set things in motion. Upon thorough investigation, there were several injuries and dents that couldn't have resulted from a simple fall. Along with the audio evidence being accepted, it became almost certain that my son's wife had pushed him. I didn't need my son to intervene, she was taken to the police station that very day. She probably won't breathe fresh air for quite some time, but that's the bed she made. My son promptly made my son's wife agree the divorce, making him officially single. Now, my son lives with Henry, raising him. While I can't bring back my beloved husband, I find happiness in living surrounded by my son and my adorable grandchild. The pain of loss and cherished moments can never return, but looking forward to my grandchild's growth brings joy. After that incident, my grandchild's mysterious power seems to have waned, and he's been talking less about my husband. Rather than dwelling on the past, I want to focus on the happiness that lies ahead.
Stop nagging me about housework and work. It's annoying.
Every time I ask something, my husband throws unkind words at me. I just wanted to walk through life together as a married couple. If it's like this, then what was the point of getting married? Just when I felt utterly hopeless, suddenly my husband's attitude changed. Maybe, just maybe, we could finally have the ideal married life I've been dreaming of. But I was fooling myself. I shouldn't have believed what he said. My name is Michelle Taylor. I'm 43. A few years ago, I met Edward while he was on a business trip, and now we live together. We were in a long-distance relationship, where we'd need to fly to see each other. Both of us were often too busy with work to meet, but after dating for a few years, we finally tied the knot.
I'm gonna make you happy for the rest of our lives.
I think I'll never forget the words of Edward's proposal. I never imagined I could marry such a wonderful man. Back then, he had a very friendly nature, and it seemed many women were attracted to him. It might sound bad, but I felt genuinely grateful that he chose me. Given the distance, I moved to his place and our married life began. But quitting my job was out of the question, so I transferred to another company. Why? Because Edward's earnings were way too low. Either the company didn't pay well, or Edward hadn't been promoted, I wasn't sure. But his salary was undeniably small. If I quit, we wouldn't be able to sustain our lives. At first, Edward wanted me to be a stay-at-home wife, but as reality set in, he stopped commenting on my job. Even now, years later, it remains the same. Together we worked to make ends meet. But then, something happened that greatly changed our lives. It was all because of Edward's behavior. He was so kind when we first got married, but as time went on, his true colors began to show. It started with such trivial matters. He wouldn't clear the dishes after eating. Hey, can you clear the table when you're done? Oh, yeah, sorry. He'd listen when I asked, but a few days later, he'd forget again. Can you take care of the dishes? Oh, yeah. We had discussed sharing household chores before marriage, but once married, Edward hardly ever did any. He always had an excuse. I thought maybe he was just tired, so I didn't nag him about chores. But to be honest, Edward finished work earlier than me, and it seemed like he had it easy. He even said his job was simple. On the other hand, my job was demanding and kept me busy almost every day. Putting up with Edward and juggling work with housework was quite a struggle. Couldn't he help out, just a little? I reached my limit and decided to have a serious talk with Edward. Hey, about the chores. Can you maybe help out a little more? I'm really tired. Suddenly, John's expression changed. You could tell at a glance that he was irritated.
I get it,
he said, anger evident in his voice. Although I didn't bring it up at the time, I couldn't help but wonder why he was so defensive. From that day on, John's behavior changed dramatically. I knew the reason. I had asked him to help with the household chores. Thinking about it now, maybe John just sees me as a convenient housemaid. One day, after finishing work as usual, I came home to the smell of alcohol permeating the room. Suppressing my disgust, I proceeded to the living room. Upon opening the door, I found John sprawled on the couch with a multitude of empty beer cans around him. I guessed he probably didn't go to work. Hey, what happened? Are you okay? Approaching my seemingly intoxicated husband, I asked. But John, opening his eyes that were shut, glared at me. You're so annoying, he snapped. Annoying? What? He responded with evident disdain and closed his eyes again. But seeing him this immersed in alcohol, I began to worry. Did he mentally break down without me noticing? Did he turn to alcohol as an escape? Hey, what's with all the booze? In response to my query, John opened his eyes and snapped. I told you, it's none of your business. But before I could argue further, John rose from the sofa and started yelling at me. Slurring his words, he hurled profanities and stormed off to his room. All I did was show concern. Why am I being treated this way? Alone in the living room, I spent some time in a daze before cleaning up the beer cans and snack wrappers that John had left around. Then one day, perhaps as a form of spite, laundry and dishes were purposely scattered around. Upon closer inspection, many dishes were broken, some of which were my favorites. Given our recent incident, I immediately knew John was responsible. I wanted to confront John about it, but he seemed to be out. Considering the time, he should have been done with work. Maybe he's out drinking? This meant he came home, trashed the place, and left. It's so malicious. I quickly dialed John's number. But he didn't answer. Sending him a text, I received an almost immediate reply. Maybe he thought a call would drag on. The message simply read, I'm not coming home tonight. No mention of where he was or what he was doing. Oh my. What should I do? Should I just remain silent and comply with John's whims? Is all of this really my fault? The whole situation just feels so hopeless. I thought I did the right thing. I wondered, what should I have done differently? Lost in thought, I started cleaning up the mess in the room. Later on, I noticed the floor had been scratched. Every time I see that scratch, I'll be reminded of this day. The next day, as he had declared, John returned. His steps were unsteady and the scent of alcohol hung on his clothes. Hey, what were you doing? I was really worried, you know. My frustration evident, I confronted my husband, who hadn't even greeted me. He replied, what I do is none of your business, is it? We're married, so of course it's my business. I was even more irritated by his attitude. Pressing him further, John gave me a vexed look and retreated to his room without a word. Oh dear. I let out an involuntary sigh. Did I really marry a man with such a difficult personality? Where did I go wrong? As I pondered these thoughts, tears began to flow uncontrollably. But I wouldn't give up. If I'm patient and continue to face my husband, maybe someday he'll understand how I feel. He might spend weekends with me or even help out with the household chores. I wouldn't ask for much. For now, I just want him to be in a good mood. With that hope, I kept trying to engage John in conversation. How was work today? Tough day? Oh, and dinner is meat and potatoes tonight. But his reactions weren't positive. Ignoring me became the norm. He'd often click his tongue and give me annoyed glances. Our marital bond, which I once tried to mend, seemed impossible to fix with John behaving this way. Lately, he wouldn't even touch the meals I prepared. Sooner or later, I started to reconsider our relationship. Should we continue being married like this? Would it be better if I just let him be? The more I thought, the more negative I became. I decided to make one last plea to John. Please, just don't ignore me when I speak to you. To my surprise, it seemed like my feelings reached him as he suddenly apologized. I'm sorry. I was taken aback. I never expected John to apologize. Then he added, from now on, I'll help out with the housework too. Really?
Yeah. I've been quite inconsiderate till now.
Saying that, he gently patted my head. It felt like it had been years. If I thought about it rationally, his sudden change of heart seemed suspicious. Given his past behavior, it's only natural to be skeptical. But I wanted to believe that John had finally turned over a new leaf, and I got carried away. Afterwards, he truly started to help around the house. Laundry, cooking, cleaning, sometimes everything was done before I got home. I never thought John could cook. I sat down in front of my beaming husband and we shared our meals together. He also began to put more effort into his job. Previously, he never did overtime, but now he mentioned studying for certifications and often stayed late at work. How's work going lately? It's going well. John replied with a smile. Our time together increased, and it felt like the honeymoon phase all over again. But there was one thing that bothered me. Even though he claimed to be doing overtime, there was no overtime pay. Considering John never did overtime before, it was puzzling. Was his company exploiting him? Hey, aren't you getting paid for overtime? When I asked him that, he replied, oh, it's overtime for independent study. I didn't put in a request for it. Oh, really? Considering the financial aspect, I'd like him to claim his overtime pay. Maybe Bob feels a bit hesitant about it. I don't know anything about Bob's company, so I'm not in a position to comment. For now, I decided to go along with Bob's thinking. But later on, the day would come when I regretted genuinely accepting the changes in Bob. One day, my business trip was confirmed. I've been away from home for work before, but this time, it's for a whole week. With excitement, feelings of anxiety and loneliness also grew. When I told Bob about the trip, his reaction was unexpected. A business trip? How many days? Usually, when I mention business trips, he doesn't seem very interested and never asks how long I'd be away. But this time, he showed interest in my job and even asked about the duration. It seems Bob is genuinely trying to prioritize our home life. With that thought, I felt glad I married this man. I think it's gonna be a week from the week after next. Oh, okay. The week after next then. Saying that, Bob started checking his calendar on his smartphone. I'm not sure about the details, but it's clear that he's busier than before. I wondered if he's become busier at work or perhaps more relied upon. Got it. Be careful, okay? Yeah, thanks. We exchanged such conversations. And on the morning of the day of the trip, I explained various household things to Bob, thinking he had finally come around. I told him about the discount store, how to iron, and where certain daily necessities are kept so he wouldn't have any trouble. Well, I'm off now. Call me if anything comes up. All right. Thank you. Saying that, I headed for my business trip. That evening, when I returned to my hotel after work, there was an unusual message from Bob. How's work going? It's going well. After some casual chit-chat, I sent him a goodnight message and put my phone down. I wondered if everything was all right with Bob. Is he feeling lonely all by himself? With such thoughts, I continued preparing for my work. About a week later, I finished my work and was heading home. Luckily, I finished a day earlier than planned. If no last-minute work comes up, I'll have tomorrow off. Feeling happy on my way back, I thought of cooking dinner and stopped by the supermarket. What should I cook? Curry, stew. Then I remembered we might be out of oil. And at the same time, I realized I hadn't told Bob I was coming home. Would he be surprised if I just showed up? I texted Bob to check if we had oil at home and to inform him that my business trip had ended early and I was on my way home. However, even after circling the supermarket, there was no reply from Bob. Was he working? Was he still doing overtime? I decided not to disturb Bob further and picked up a bottle of oil, thinking it's always good to have some extra. After shopping, I was on my way home when Bob called. "Hey, are you coming home now? Where are you?" For some reason, Bob sounded panicked. Was something wrong? Yeah. I'm in the apartment elevator right now. Upon hearing that, Bob hung up the phone without saying anything else. What on earth is happening? Worried about Bob, I hurried to our apartment.
I'm home.
Edward.
You okay?
I call out, but there's no answer. Edward. Just as I'm taking off my shoes and heading inside, my husband comes rushing out of the living room and collapses right in front of me. Are you okay?
It's hard to breathe. Call an ambulance.
Saying this, he grabs my hand. I quickly pull out my cell and call 911. Within minutes, the ambulance arrives. I let the paramedics into the house, and they check on my husband. Is he going to be all right? What's going to happen to him? While I'm watching and worrying, I notice something odd. There are a pair of women's shoes I don't recognize. Obviously, they aren't the paramedics' shoes. Not mine either. I suddenly feel a tightness in my chest. Then, glancing at the living room window, I see women's lingerie hanging there. Could it be, is Edward having an affair? Thinking back, he did seem awfully panicked when I called. Maybe he was trying to hide his affair? I cautiously look around the house, pretending to prepare for my husband's hospital visit so as not to arouse suspicion. Living room, restroom, kitchen. But, there's no sign of her. If those shoes are here, she must be around unless she escaped through a window. Finally, when I check the bathroom, I see a light on and a silhouette. I open the door and look at the bathtub. I can't believe what's in front of me. I wanted to turn away. I wish I had been mistaken about the shoes and the lingerie. I head back to the front door. The conversation with the paramedics goes like this. You're his family, right? Please come with us. I'm sorry, there's been a mistake. Excuse me? The paramedics sound shocked. Edward, too, lets out a surprised sound. Ignoring them, I bring the woman from the bathroom to the front door. This woman is family. She'll come with us. Wait a minute. As I say this, the woman gets flustered. Edward seems shocked too, and suddenly sits up with force. You. The paramedics quickly try to calm down the agitated Edward. But honestly, I think this guy's fine. What do you think? Well, he doesn't seem to be in any critical condition. In the end, it's decided that Edward doesn't need immediate medical attention, but if he feels unwell again, he should go to the hospital. The room becomes silent after the paramedics leave. So, what's going on here? I sit both Edward and the woman down and demand an explanation. At first, both of them look uncomfortable and remain silent, but as I continue to stare silently, they seem to give in. Edward starts speaking. I'm sorry for the misunderstanding. She's a colleague from work. We're close, but there's nothing going on. After Edward, the colleague speaks up. That's right. We were just having a meeting here. There's nothing going on, I promise. Now you tell me this? Do you need to take a bath for the meeting? Do you need to dry your underwear too? What's going on? I said, pointing to the underwear hanging in the living room. The two of them exchanged glances, looking like they were in trouble. I knew all about it. If you have time to think of a weird excuse, just tell me the truth. As I pressed them, my husband, Edward, looked up to the heavens and spilled everything. I'm really sorry. It's not just about being sorry. So, you've been lying about working late? It seems Edward had a special relationship with his junior, Kate, after we got married. The reason he started cheating was because I kept nagging him to do the household chores. But after Kate told him a man who can do household chores is so cool, he decided to give it a try. And suddenly he was working late because he wanted to meet Kate. I didn't miss the smug look on Kate's face. That's why there was no overtime pay. He wasn't even trying to get any certifications. It was all just talk. I get what you're thinking. Let's just get a divorce. Please, go ahead and be with her. I was so fed up that I proposed a divorce. It wasn't a threat or anything. The fact that I'd been deceived all this time was just unbearable. But Edward wouldn't listen.
A divorce? That's not the right move.
He said things like that. Things like, if you'd told me you were coming home, this wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, it's not fair to come home unannounced.
That's what they both started saying. Had I been fooled by my husband's act for so long? The thought made me feel so pathetic. Ma'am, look. Edward really seems to be regretting it, said Kate, trying desperately to calm me down. You don't really not want to get divorced, do you? You're just blaming me for the reason you cheated, aren't ya? Enough is enough. Let's get a divorce.
No, that's not it.
When I looked at Kate, she quickly looked away, seeming uncomfortable. Kate's pouting too. You two should live happily together. Pouting? I'm not. Kate tried to retort, but I cut her off, saying, You're clearly pouting. This made Kate purse her lips even more. Look, she seems to regret it too.
Shut up. It's too late for any excuses. I won't forgive you.
I shouted, and the two of them shrunk back. I hope they reflect on what they've done. And the things they've said. After that, I hired a lawyer and began preparations to file for divorce and claim a share of the assets. Edward kept calling me the whole time. And to top it all off, I even got a call from his parents. They were understanding, and when I told them everything Edward had done to me, they apologized and agreed to help with the divorce. Eventually, they must have spoken to Edward because during the divorce proceedings, a very tired-looking Edward agreed to the divorce without any fuss. I reported Edward and Kate's affair to their company. After the divorce, John and Kate, given they worked at the same company, quickly got caught having an affair. The two of them were given the cold shoulder by their colleagues and seemed to have lost their place at the company. On top of that, they became the gossip target of the chatty older women, and before they knew it, even clients were talking about it. Unable to stand such an environment, the two of them quit their jobs. I'm not sure if they're married, but they must be strapped for cash. If they did get married, I can easily picture them having disputes over money. I moved to a new apartment right away. The place I live in now is way more comfortable than before, and it's cheaper. Come to think of it, I remember choosing that old place based on John's preferences. When I get home, a sigh of relief escapes me, thankful that that chapter of my life is finally over. All right. Since the divorce, I've been more focused on my work, and my performance has significantly improved. Thanks to that, I got a raise. I thought I might have decided on the divorce in a fit of anger, but now that it's all over, I feel elated. Feels like a weight's been lifted. With that thought, I savor my favorite tea, gearing up for what tomorrow brings.